Hello, I'm Dan Gibson.
And I'm Chad Dole. In this video, we will look at the objection that Petra cannot be the original Mecca because there is no evidence of Islam in Petra. We will examine the evidence we do have, the presence of Islamic pottery and inscriptions in Petra, as well as the presence of two mosques in Little Petra, or El Baida. Finally, we'll consider Wadi, all as clear evidence of Muslim occupation near Petra.
So let's start with Islamic pottery. Pottery finds are the backbone of archaeological studies. In Petra, Islamic pottery comes from the first half of the 7th century through to the 12th century. These include mafjarware, which is from Palestine, glazed pottery, as well as examples of handmade vessels. These predate the massive earthquake that devastated Petra and the entire region in 748 AD, or 130 after the Hijra. Then, of course, there are scattered pottery that came from the Abbasid area as well, but nothing like the large amount of pottery from the Umayyad area.
So what do we have for inscriptions in Petra?
Well, in Khirbet Nawafla, there's a gravestone inscription that dates from 170 after the Hijra. That was found there. It belonged to Al-Hussein bin Abdullah, who was buried there. Also, there are 7 early Islamic inscriptions that were found in Wadi Dankar al-Khazna in Petra back around 2005. Let's look at them for a moment. These are scratched on the rock walls along with petroglyphs and other drawings. This area was at one time a rock quarry, and they are written in simple Arabic letters, and they lack any diacritical points. The first inscription we will examine is number 4. Now, these inscriptions were numbered by Zayd al-Salamin. This inscription is undated, and it reads, "By the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, O Allah, forgive your servant Ismail, the son of Ibrahim." And he wrote it, and the rest has been damaged, so we cannot make out the date. What makes this striking is the name of the writer, Ishmael, the son of Abraham. Now, before you get too excited, remember that Ishmael, the son of the patriarch Abraham, lived several thousand years before this. And this inscription was found in a quarry where rocks had been chipped away over the ages. So it would be impossible to find an inscription from the famous Ishmael, the son of Abraham, in the rocks of this quarry. So obviously, this is a later Ishmael who wrote this, but it does jump out as quite the coincidence that this inscription is found in the very place where Ishmael lived and where he and Abraham built an altar.
If you haven't read the English translation of Al-Izraqi's Akbar Mecca, then go to nabatia.net and download it. It's totally free. The story of Ishmael, Abraham, and Mecca is all there in great detail. Are there any other Islamic inscriptions that we've been able to find in Petra?
There is another inscription. This one is dated 109 after the Hijra. O Allah, forgive Suleiman bin Mahmud, and it's written in the month of Abi al-Akhir in the year 109. The inscription is typical of early Islamic writings, and the name Suleiman is written without an aleph in the middle, which is common at this time. Yet another inscription reads, O Allah, forgive Bukhair, the son of Al-Harith, written in the year 93 and 100. This inscription also does not use an aleph in the center. Yet another inscription reads, O Allah, forgive Omar bin Sa'ad, written in the year, and then the rock is broken off. It is written in the style of the first 2 centuries of Islam. And yet another inscription reads, O Allah, forgive Walid his sin, and it is also undated. There are some other undated and poorly preserved inscriptions, and finally, this one from the year 173 after the Hijra. O Allah, forgive Muwafaq bin Abd al-Khalik, written in the year 173. There are several things to note here. First is that the inscriptions are from the first 2 centuries of Islam. They are unvoweled text and all use a simple early form of Arabic. They end in 173 AH, which wouldn't surprise us. I would expect this because by this time the kibla direction had switched to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. So there are 8 inscriptions from the first 2 centuries of Islam.
Why don't we find more inscriptions from the first centuries of Islam?
Now think about the history of Petra. Muhammad was supposed to have been born there during the year of Abraha the elephant's attack. It wasn't until he was in his 30s that he began to promote himself as a prophet. People in the city were not happy with him, and this included the Christians, the Jews, and the Quraysh. So his followers were forced to flee, and the first group fled to Abyssinia in Africa. That wasn't very successful, so they returned when they heard that the persecution had slowed down, especially after Muhammad had spoke favorably about 3 pagan gods who were worshipped in the city: Alat, Menawat, and Al-Uzza. You can find their temples and idol platforms in Petra. The returning Muslims soon set Muhammad straight, and so he claimed that what he spoke were satanic verses and that Satan was trying to slip something into the Quran. Taking his praise of pagan gods back, persecution started again, and this time his followers fled to Medina, and Muhammad soon followed after them. So during this time, how much evidence of Muslims would have been found in the holy city? The first mosques were built in Medina, and there is evidence in Medina of early mosques, but none in the holy city of Petra, or Mecca in the Hejaz for that matter.
So Dan, what about the discoveries by the Al-Bayda project? Didn't archaeologists find 2 mosques there right outside Petra?
Yes, the discoveries of a Muslim village just north of Petra in Al-Bayda were very exciting. For a long time, I have been claiming that Muhammad and his wife most likely lived in Little Petra. And we're told that Khadija had a house and a storage place in a narrow box canyon near the Kaaba. Camels were kept outside to the north. But the Quraysh trapped Muhammad and his family in the canyon and tried to starve them. The only place near Petra where this would work is at Little Petra. And so it comes as no surprise that just outside of the canyon mouth, archaeologists discovered the remains of a Muslim occupation, including 2 small mosques.
I personally have never visited this site, but Dan and 2 of his sons have been there several times. So when you traveled there, what was your impression of Little Petra? How was the shawarma around there?
Well, there's no shawarmas there. You're out in the middle of nowhere. But several things come to mind. Most tourists want to see something impressive, so they go to what is known as Little Petra to see the narrow canyon and the place filled with rock-cut rooms and stairs, and there are dining rooms and some living spaces and some storage spots. And through the whole area there are cisterns to store water. It's well worth the visit. Just outside of Little Petra to the south, one can find a Neolithic village which was supposedly occupied from 8,500 BC to about 5,500 BC. If this is correct, that would be before the time of Abraham. Maybe those villages go all the way back to Seir the Hittite, for whom the mountains are named. For a long time I wondered about the name Al-Bayda, because this name is mentioned several times in early Islamic history and the prehistory. Indeed, I believe that the Al-Bayda mentioned in Islamic history is none other than the Al-Bayda that is there by Petra. It was only later, after the Black Rock was moved to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, that a place in Saudi was named Al-Bayda and the original location was ignored or forgotten. But what is of interest to us in this video is the Islamic village in front of the entrance to the Box Canyon. 2 mosques were found at this site, and dating them has become interesting. Both mosques have a mihrab, so they are not from the early half of the 1st century of Islam. Each mosque appears to have a different kibla direction. The mosque closest to Little Petra, known as Kusa II, faces 164 degrees, which makes it a between kibla. This would put the date sometime around AH 87 or up to 126. The second mosque, known as Kusa I, has a Meccan-facing qibla facing 155 degrees, making it a later structure. The earliest Meccan mosques appeared around 88 after the Hijra, but this qibla does not become popular until a number of years later.
Why don't these mosques right outside of Petra face the Petra Kaaba?
I wondered about that myself. However, remember, we're about 3 miles from the Petra Kaaba, so it wouldn't be hard to know which way to face. You're so close. Yeah. But it wouldn't be hard to just walk right over there and worship there. So there was no need to build a structure close to the Petra Kaaba because you could just go there. It was that close.
That explanation makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, we know that in the beginning of Islam, prayer was all outdoor. Some of the earliest qiblas were in a clearing out in the wilderness. Eventually, Muslims built small mosques with the qibla wall, and as larger mosques were needed for Friday prayers, Muslims used large open-air areas, often with a roof over the first few rows from the qibla wall. When Hajjaj bin Yusuf insisted that people pray towards the between direction, which he invented, they needed a way that indicated the new direction. And so a mihrab niche was introduced to mark a qibla direction.
So far, we have 2 mosques from the first 2 centuries of Islam, plus pottery, plus inscriptions. So what else do we have?
Some months ago, we received an email from a scholar named Ahmed. He noticed something interesting when he was reading early Muslim writers, and he drew our attention to Wadi Tuwa and Shituwa, both places that were very close to the holy city. So here's another situation where if Petra was the holy city, then these places should be identifiable in the area.
And so I sent an email to you, and you investigated it, and then you got all excited.
Yeah, it was actually quite interesting for me. Ahmed suggested that Wadi Tuwa and Di Tuwa were the original names of what is known today as Wadi Musa. This is based on 2 mentions of Wadi Tuwa in the Quran. First, Surah 20 verse 12. Indeed, I am your Lord, so remove your sandals. Indeed, you are in the sacred valley of Tuwa. Second, we have Surah 79 verse 16. When his Lord called to him in the sacred valley of Tuwa. In both instances, the verses are part of the story of how the prophet Musa or Moses and how he received divine revelation in the sacred valley of Tuwa.
There are also references in other writings. For instance, there is Fakihi's book of the reports about Mecca, where he describes Di Tuwa as one of 3 valleys that constitute the urban area of Mecca during his time. It descends between the High Thaniya and the farthest Thaniya, also known as the Green, evidently merging into Wadi Ibrahim and passing through Jarwell. Ibn Ishaq also mentions this valley. The Prophet Muhammad, upon reaching Di Tuwa during the conquest of Mecca, paused on his mount, that's on his horse, and he was wrapped in a red striped cloak, and he lowered his head in humility before Allah. This moment signifies the Prophet's gratitude and humility as he was about to re-enter his birthplace, just outside of the holy city. Bukhari says in his chapter titled The Entry of the Prophet into Mecca that Ibn Umar used to stay overnight in Di Tuwa when approaching Mecca and would only enter the city during the daylight, following the practice of the Prophet Muhammad. Sahih Muslim also mentions this hadith. Ibn Kathir discusses the significance of the Tuwa in multiple contexts. He cites the practice of the Prophet and his companions, emphasizing the location where the Prophet prayed and rested before entering Mecca. He elaborates on the geographical details, noting the specific places associated with the Prophet's actions.
So the question kind of boils down to this. Could Wadi Musa in Petra be the Quran's Wadi Tuwa? To investigate this, we need to understand something of the topography and archaeology of Wadi Musa just outside of Petra.
So over the years, I've made over 80 exploratory trips into Petra and into the region around it. And I'm ashamed to say, I've never really taken Wadi Musa into much consideration. If Ahmed had not contacted us, we probably would have missed this. I'm very grateful for the work that others are doing in taking an interest in the Petra kibla.
Obviously, Wadi Tuwa and Wadi Musa are different names. Place names change over time, like ancient Mecca adopting the Greek name Petra. How do we correlate the names of places in the Islamic record with their modern names?
Ibn Kathir, writing around 700 after the Hijrah, or around 1300 AD, specifically comments on Ibn Umar's hadith about the prophets staying in Tuwa. This is found in the section on the farewell pilgrimage in his book titled The Beginning and the End. Many or most of these places are not known today, because the names of most of these places have been changed today among the Arabs who are there, as ignorance has overcome most of them. Remember, this is him writing. So here Ibn Kathir tells us that by his day, some 700 years after the events took place, the names of the places around the holy city were lost. So he can only describe them to us.
Another writer is Sahih Bukhari. He tells us the following about the holy city. Abdullah ibn Umar told him that the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, used to stop at Tuwa and spend the night there until morning, praying the dawn prayer when he arrived in Mecca. The prayer place of the Messenger of God, may God bless him and grant him peace, was on a thick hill, not in the mosque that was built there, but lower than that on the thick hill. And that Abdullah told him that the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, faced the two obligatory prayers, the mountain between it and the tall mountain towards the Kaaba. He made the mosque that was built there to the left of the mosque at the edge of the hill, and the place of prayer of the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, is below it on the black hill. You leave 10 cubits or so of the hill, then you pray facing the two obligatory prayers from the mountain that is between you and the Kaaba. It's a little complicated, this description, but notice Muhammad would spend the night at Tuwa and would enter the holy city in the morning. Muhammad would spend the night on a thick hill, but not in the mosque that was built there. The wording here is interesting. A thick hill and a mosque built there. So here we have our first clue. Next to the wadi was a thick hill, meaning there is room on the hill in order to construct buildings, and a place of worship was built there.
During my visits to Petra, I would have been puzzled by this description because my focus was always on Petra, or on the holy places, and not on the modern town of Wadi Musa, built just outside the entrance to Petra. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know much about the archaeological dig on Khirbat al-Nawafla, this hill that overlooks Wadi Musa. Today, Wadi Musa is filled with modern buildings, but in 1997, archaeologists excavated the ruins of 7 sites on the hill overlooking what today is known as Wadi Musa. There is an interpretive center on that hill, but few people go up the hill to see it. Note that Muhammad did not sleep in the mosque, but moved up to a different spot where he could see over the mountain that blocked his view to the Kaaba. So below are the GPS coordinates of where I believe this spot was. and from there it was 2.5 miles directly to the Kaaba. But a mountain stands in the way. But this spot is 1,230 meters above sea level. The mountain between them is only 1,000 meters above sea level, and the altar in the center of Petra is at 83 meters above sea level. Wadi Araba to the west is close to sea level, as it drops down to the Dead Sea, which is below sea level. So if Muhammad chose to sleep at the highest point, he could see over the mountain and down to the altar that Abraham built.
I was very excited when I realized that the ancient description fit in this case. Muhammad would go up the hill near the mosque at the top, and then he would go out to a high spot overlooking the holy city. He was 200 feet higher than the hill that was between him and the altar, and he could see 200 feet lower down into the valley.
The archaeological excavations show us that there was a place of worship on top of the hill. Because it had no mihrab and it did not face Mecca in Saudi Arabia, the archaeologists did not classify it as a mosque. During their dig of the area, including residential and other buildings, they found some crosses carved on stones, and from the Umayyad and early Abbasid levels, they found a lamp with crosses, so they assumed that the structure close by was a church from the late Byzantine era.
The archaeological digs were all done some 30 years ago. Since then, this area overlooking Wadi Musa has seen significant development. There are now cafes and hotels and swimming pools there. Much of what the archaeologists found is now covered over. But the topographical layout of the whole area is still the same, even if the buildings have all been removed or renovated or covered.
So Chad, you did a lot of research on this topic, and I think you were pretty excited. What I found fascinating is that the entire area of Wadi Musa was considered sacred. The sacred area started at the Moses Spring and all the way through Wadi Musa to the entrance of Petra. That was all a special sacred area. Listen to what it says in the Quran in Surah 20 and verse 12. Indeed, I am your Lord, so remove your sandals. Indeed, you are in the sacred valley of Tuwa. When the people of Beni Israel came to Tuwa, they would remove their sandals. Azraki's Akbar Mecca from the 3rd century tells us the nation of Beni Israel, when they came to Tuwa, would remove their sandals in reverence of the sanctuary. In the Quran, in Surah 17, it tells us, Exalted is he who took his servant by night from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, whose surroundings we have blessed. On another video, we have pointed out that the original Aqsa was at the outskirts of Wadi Musa, where the people washed before entering the sacred area. This area was also referred to as the Holy Land in Surah 5:21. O my people, enter the Holy Land which Allah has assigned to you.
So you're saying that the Moses Spring outside of Petra up to the sacred perimeter of Petra were all considered sacred?
I believe so, yes. From these verses, it fits. Tuwa included much of what is today the town of Wadi Musa. We can come to this conclusion by recognizing that when these early writers were describing the area around Mecca, they were speaking of the first Mecca, not the Mecca in Saudi Arabia, which didn't exist during the lifetime of Muhammad.
The topography fits. The manuscripts support it. I was thrilled to find my first potential mosque just outside of Petra as I pored over the archaeological reports. Dan's found hundreds, so all of this is totally unsurprising for him and he doesn't get excited about it anymore, but I had fun.
Okay.
If all of this is very new to you, then I would encourage you to watch some of our earlier videos. Or better yet, once the new documentary film comes out, you can learn quite a lot about the orientation of early mosques in that film. The first kibla direction was towards the first Mecca, and the first Kaaba in the center of the city of Petra. Over 60 mosques faced Petra long before any mosques faced Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
There is one more topic which we should talk about, and that is the Petra scrolls. We have covered this in other videos, but in the book, Let the Stone Speak, there is a chapter which we address this. But very quickly, let us review it here.
Yeah, for hundreds of years, Muslim scholars have scoured the Middle East looking for the origin of the Arabic dialect of the Quran. They have looked for any evidence of a region and a people group where the Quraysh Arabic dialect survives. They have, of course, searched in and around Mecca and Saudi Arabia, but they have not found any evidence of Qurayshi Arabic. They have searched the Gulf states and across the Arab world, but they have not found the source of ancient Qurayshi Arabic.
Until they examined the Petra scrolls, and there they found that in 592, or about the year that Muhammad was born, the people used the Quranic form of the construct state in the city of Petra. No matter where you travel in the Middle East, in pre-Islamic times, the construct state, which means the definite article in Arabic, was something like adding "n" to the front of a word. A house became an beit, the house. But in ancient Petra, they would say el beit. This is what we're looking for.
So the Arabic language used in Petra during Muhammad's lifetime seems to have been the language of the Quraysh, which became Quranic Arabic. This is another important piece of evidence of the birth of Islam in the city of Petra.
We also want to remind you that Petra is the home to a structure that appears to be the first Kaaba. It matches the measurements and the descriptions of the Kaaba during Muhammad's lifetime given to us by Az-Zuraki.
So there are all these layers of evidence of Islamic occupation in Petra. And a fuller description of this Petra Kaaba is provided in Chapter 8 of the book, Let the Stone Speak. You can download that book for free at nabatea.net.
So thank you for listening to us discuss some of the more advanced ideas regarding the recent discoveries of the evidence of Islam in Petra. And thanks to Ahmed, who dug up much of this material about the topography that is there and sent it to us. This video has been about the evidence of Islam in Petra. And we've looked briefly at pottery, inscriptions, 2 mosques, and the topography of Wadi Tuwa in the Islamic literature, and how it fits the topography of Wadi Musa just outside of the gate of Petra, and finally, the Arabic language spoken in ancient Petra as discovered in the Petra scrolls. So, I am Dan Gibson.
And I am Chad Dole, and this has been another video in the series Archaeology and Islam.